So welcome everybody. This is SharePoint Monthly Community Call. This is August 2020 edition. It is August 11th, 2020. And today we have a really nice agenda related on quick updates from the Microsoft side of the house. And then related updates on the SharePoint development and extensibility. Development is a pretty broad topic in this course, especially on the monthly call. And then we're going to go quick acknowledgement of the community contributors within the past months. And then we go to the primary topic of today, where our Chaks, Chakkaradeep, or Chaks in short, are going to talk about the latest innovation, latest capabilities on the Power Platform integration within SharePoint Online. Chaks is the PM who owns this area. So he's really responsible of making sure that the extensibility between Power Platform and SharePoint Online and OneDrive actually as well, unless completely mistaken, Chaks can actually clarify that as we go to his section, are false on his table as well. So he's really the man on this side as well. Those, by the way, who do not know, Chaks was also part of the original crew who created SharePoint Framework, so he has a good track record. So thank you, Chaks, for that one. Anyway, let's actually get moving on the other slides. Quick recap on the assets, just that everybody has access on them and remembers the addresses. So AKMS M365 Dev YouTube is our Microsoft 365 developer videos channels. We also have the Microsoft 365 SharePoint Community PnP videos, which is more community related, more MVPs, and more broad, not just developer videos. And that's in the AKMS M365 PnP videos. We do have a lot of open source assets available in the GitHub. So the most common GitHub organizations would be github.com/SharePoint, github.com/PnP, and github.com/Office Dev, and not forgetting actually github.com/Microsoft Graph. We also have relatively new sample galleries related on certain areas of extensibility. This is an area which is evolving over the time, but right now already there's a SharePoint Framework web parts gallery, SharePoint Framework extensions gallery, list formatting gallery, and Microsoft Teams sample gallery, which is evolving as well. In the longer run, we're looking into creating a real flexible, let's say, more end-user friendly way of exposing all of the samples which we have across the Microsoft 365 in a single location. That solution of website planning is already ongoing, but we can't yet give you an exact ETA on that one. The whole point being on the fact that you can more easily find all of the awesome samples what community has contributed throughout the years in the different areas of Microsoft 365. And if you're looking into getting started on the community, open source initiatives and samples and community calls, you're not quite sure where to start. If you go AKMS M365 PnP, that's the one location and one landing page where you can get access on Microsoft Graph community calls, Microsoft Graph documentation, Microsoft Teams documentation, SharePoint Framework documentations and sample locations, and open source projects as well. So a really, really great one URL to remember. Now, a few announcements and a few news from our side. We've been promoting this a few times already in the Twitter, in the Microsoft 365 Patterns and Practices account, and earlier today I promoted this through my account as well. We'll do more promotions, but we'll have a specific virtual conference on Microsoft 365 topics on the 1st of September, and this is really MVPs and community talking to community. So it's not targeted to be just Microsoft explaining to you what's latest and greatest. That's Ignite, that's Build. This conference is more around community talking to community about practices and real-world experiences on how to make things happen. So we have people talking in this conference like Bob Sherman, Chris Kent, David Warner, Hugo Bernier, Paolo Bielorsi, Erwin van Hoonen, and so on. But if you go to the AKMS address, you can actually register to that conference, and then you can see also the agenda, which is available on the site as well. Now, what else is new? SharePoint Framework 1.11, since the last time when we went through the monthly summary, SharePoint Framework 1.11 has been now released, which was basically extending the capabilities on the integration side with Microsoft Teams. So you can do more and more on the Microsoft Teams sites as well when you're using the SharePoint Framework. And also, the publish, the AppSource and store is now supported. So you can actually create SharePoint Framework solutions and then publish them to be store available for the what is it, 500 million, I don't know exact numbers, millions and millions and millions of end users across the world. So now all of those solutions can be, well, not all of them, but solutions can be built with SharePoint Framework as well, which is really, really cool. Now, what else is new on the store side of the house? We want to just mention the people and companies. So Lightning Tools, Hyperfish, SharePoint List, Office at Work, and Rencore are our preview partners for making sure that the store submission process and the SharePoint Framework and store process are working properly. And thank you for all of these companies for helping us to make sure that the validation process is working properly and providing us the examples. And their solutions are mainly already submitted, so you can actually go to the AppSource and find the Lightning Tool solution as an example, which has been built using SharePoint Framework, which is really, really cool, which, by the way, works also in Microsoft Teams, which is even cooler. Now, what else is new? Obviously, as part of this journey of enabling publishing of the SharePoint Framework solutions to the store, we have provided a new set of documentation. If you go to the AKMS SPFx and under SharePoint Framework, you can actually find a specific section where we talk about publishing SharePoint Framework applications to the marketplace, where we provide guidance and instructions and policies which you need to apply on the solutions as well. So there are a certain set of let's say capabilities which are supported and certain set of capabilities which are not supported. So on the documentation, we call all those out. And by the way, if something is missing or if we need to have additional guidance in this documentation, please do let us know, so we know, so we can address whatever is your preference or whatever is missing there. Also wanted to promote a relatively new thing in the same documentation section, which is building for Microsoft Teams using SharePoint Framework. So obviously, as you know, the Microsoft Teams is a really big focus area in the Microsoft side. And hopefully you do know already as well that using SharePoint Framework, the same component can actually work as a web part or as a full-page application, or as a Microsoft Teams personal application or Microsoft Teams tab. So you can actually use exactly the same development experience for Microsoft Teams and SharePoint using the SharePoint Framework. And that's pretty cool. And we have a specific section available on that one. So building really and targeting for Microsoft Teams and why is it important, what's the advantages, like automatic solution hosting, existing authentication features, there's single sign-on natively supported and all of that. So really cool stuff as well. Some of the other things what I wanted to quickly recap and promote before we go to the main presenter of the day, who's Chaks. We do have new templates available in the Modern SharePoint site. So if you go to the lookbook.microsoft.com, we have the new employee onboarding template available and new education templates. There's actually multiple templates available for education site. And these are really cool. They're free, designed for you to take advantage any way you want. So basically, they're there to help you to get started with example content, example structures, example even documents and files inside of them. And you can easily provision them available. What's really, by the way, cool is that the education templates do not require you to be a tenant administrator. So you can actually use those templates without being a tenant administrator. And we will do that similar change for some of the classic templates as well. So pretty soon, in a normal case, you don't have to be a tenant administrator anymore when you go to the lookbook.microsoft.com and you can provision new sites using example content, example designs, and you can be just a site collection administrator, or we will create the site collection for you based on your permissions. Good. Joel, I'll come back on your question in a second. So what's happening now? So 1.11 of SharePoint Framework is out. 1.12 of Vesa Microsoft Teams is a big focus area on that one. There will be also improvements in Microsoft Graph APIs. So we're looking into announcing quite soon new APIs available, which partly can be actually already visible in the beta documentation already. So I'm teasing you if you want to spend some time on hunting them down. There's a more branding settings coming for portal side, better Microsoft Teams embedding support in general, SharePoint Framework store improvements, so modernizing the whole store experience. Right now, there are certain PCs which are still using the classic experiences. That's in the pipeline as well, and then multiple other topics. Now, Joel was asking related on using SharePoint Framework in Office desktop add-ins and apps. That's still in the works. And what I would encourage is that there will be a survey related on Office add-ins capabilities coming actually later today from the Office development account or Microsoft 365 development account. So please give it that feedback that you're interested on building SharePoint Framework-based Office add-ins as well, so that they will get the input, they're aware of that ask, they understand the demand for that one as well. I think it's scheduled for like within an hour or two coming out as a survey. Good. Fluid framework support. Nandit is asking on that one. Right now, the Fluid framework, I'm just confusing that, the Fluent framework. Fluid framework is still in preview. We're working on having a native Fluid framework support whenever the time is right. That is not yet the time. We did preview something already back in November. You can find the videos from YouTube on that one, but right now we're still waiting for Fluid framework itself to be on the right level before we can actually integrate that natively within the SharePoint framework. But that's not the case yet. Fluent, which is the UX layer of the frameworks, and that's also in works. And the UX layer, the controls and everything else is now being worked on. And when that's in the right level, also SharePoint Online is starting to use them, Microsoft Teams starts to use them, and then at the same time, SharePoint Framework will start using them as well. Or you can actually start using them as well. So that's the timelines right now. Good. I'll come back on Erkan's. Well, actually, Erkan has a good question related on out-of-the-box web parts as an open source solution. We might actually get some of the out-of-the-box web parts source open, but most likely not as a open source solution. And source open would mean that we would share the code, but we wouldn't actually get contributions for out-of-the-box capabilities. That might happen for some of them, but I cannot promise the timeline. I cannot promise which one those would be. Now, a quick recap on other things, typical things which is happening. So a quick recap on the extensibility UserVoice. The two ones which I'm actually pointing out, the number 5 is already submitted. For whatever reason, I haven't actually closed that one yet in the UserVoice, so I will go to the UserVoice and close it right after this call. So basically supporting SharePoint Framework solution in the AppSource is now fully shipped, and you can actually submit your solutions to AppSource today, and it will go through the validation, and it will eventually be available for customers to use. The number 2 item is also really interesting. So this one is super, super close. It's now a matter of writing the announcements and making sure that the documentation is out. But basically, we have the taxonomy term store APIs or graph APIs available already today. It's just really a matter of getting the announcement out and then accessing the information. So really, really cool stuff as well. For the other stuff and for the other items, we're still pending on getting actual updates and actual insights. So I cannot actually give you an exact estimates on those for now. Good. Quick update also on the Sharing is Caring initiative side. If you're looking into contributing in open source, you don't feel comfortable enough of clicking the edit button and submitting a typo fix or understanding how GitHub works, please join on our Sharing is Caring sessions hosted by David and Hugo. And these are really great sessions. They're getting a lot of good feedback related on learning how to use GitHub and how to contribute on documentation, how to contribute on the samples as well. So really cool stuff. Please join on this. Now, quick update on the August 2020 update. So it is actually not yet available. I'm slightly teasing on the slide. I still need to do a few updates on the blog post, but basically there will be a blog post later today, early tomorrow, which is summarizing again all of the updates and great stuff which has happened within the past month and who have been contributing across the different Microsoft 365 and SharePoint community initiatives. So thank you in advance on the, well, wait for 1 day and you'll get access on the summary on all of the things. But here's the list of people who have contributed within the past month. So these are the people who have been active in our open source community channels and who's been contributing and helping others in the open source projects and helping others by contributing, for example, in the documentation side of the house. So thank you for actually helping others to succeed as well. We are much stronger together rather than competing. And that's why building these communities and making everybody feel comfortable enough of contributing and getting involved is super important. So thank you for being there and helping us to be successful. On the company side, this is the list of companies from which employees they have had permissions to actually contribute in our open source side of the house. So thank you for all of these companies as well, because they allow their employees being active in the open source and contributing and helping others to succeed as well. So thank you for those as well. And then on the Microsoft side of the house, we have a typical list of people. There's few changes here and there, obviously, due to summer vacations and all of that, but quite a typical list of people from here as well. But it's good to see active contribution from internal people as well. But that's it from my side. I'm 2 minutes over the planned schedule, which is not too bad. But Chaks is next on the table. You're not on the table, right? Sitting by the table.
Table is better than lobby, trust me.
Yeah. Good point. Good point.
Today, I'm very specifically going to talk about Power Automate, one of my favorite features, and pretty much one of the features that many of our customers have been asking for. So when Power Automate and SharePoint triggers were announced like 3 years back, we basically had the two most common triggers: when an item is created, and then when an item is created or modified. And basically, if you wanted to focus on running a flow or running a workflow, when something was modified in a list, you had to depend on when an item is created or modified, and people had to go through several hacks to understand how to determine the particular flow run was based on an item creation or based on an item modification, which runs to a lot of folks, and quite frankly, it didn't help me as well as a PM working on the product to go build some of the awesome things that we can build using Power Automate and SharePoint. So obviously, we had this UserVoice item that actually is one of the top UserVoice items right now that talks about it would be nice to have a trigger if a certain column in a SharePoint that is modified, and also to understand what column was modified, right? That's also one of the typical things you would want to do. In this case, from the UserVoice item, we can see that if the status column is modified or if the assigned to is modified, so then you could go and make something that is very particular to your business scenario when things get modified in the list. So it took a long for us, but I'm happy to announce that this is now available to everyone. If you go to this UserVoice link, I have also given instructions on what is available. When I come back from vacation, yes, I am on vacation, and just, I love Vesa so much, and of course the community here. So I just came out of my vacation for this hour to deliver this session. But when I come back from vacation next week, it will be documented as well in our Power Automate documentation portal to drive the scenario with an example. So the scenario is really simple. Something got modified. I want to know what got modified, and then get the current value, and then go about doing my workflow, building my workflow. So let's first go into where you can find this in your tenant if you go to Power Automate website. So if you go to Power Automate website and create a flow, and if you choose the SharePoint for your trigger, you should be able to see when an item or file is modified. So one of the things we did simplify this time is we have one trigger, and you could choose the trigger to target either a list or a library. So you don't have to go find another trigger for file. So for example, here I can say, the site address, and it comes up. There you go. And then I could say, here's the list or library name, right? So you can see that I have both list and library name here. So it gives me all of the libraries and lists available. So it's not very particular to list. It's not very particular library. So you can choose one in the same trigger, which I find is a very good direction going forward. You will see us making this change across the triggers, so we don't confuse customers, and you have one trigger, you can keep changing between the list and library. So once you do this, you have the other options as well, the folder, and even if you want to just pick the columns that you want. Say, for example, if you have more than 12 lookup columns, that won't work because of the threshold we have. So you could choose a particular view to bring very specific columns back. So this trigger will give you the ability to run only when items are modified in that particular list I have selected here. Now, there's also a new action available that is called get changes. So get changes for an item or a file. And again, here it targets both item or a file. And in the case of file, as the name suggests, it's only about the properties and not about the content. So when you think about this is the second question to the riddle, right? So, okay, something got modified. What got modified, right? So that's something I want to understand. So now you could say, well, I'm looking at the site call list experiences and asset manager. So I'm going to just select the same thing here. Asset manager, and for the ID. So I can choose the ID from the trigger. So then it gives me whether it's a file or an item. The ID is consistent. I can get back the item or the file that are associated with it. And then you have an interesting two options, since and until. So you're getting changes for a particular item. You can specify the time interval because this is a workflow, and things get executed at certain point in time. Changes happen at certain point in time in SharePoint, and then changes happen at certain point in time in Power Automate, meaning that the run could be later than change happened in SharePoint, maybe 5 minutes or 15 minutes. So you would want to understand what is the change happen for this particular item since a time interval. Now you could go and manage your own time interval here, but we thought that would be really bad for users. So when an item or file is modified trigger comes with tokens that you can use in place for the since and until properties in this action, meaning that the trigger knows when it was last checked. When did it last check for the flow run or for item modifications. Using that, you could depend your business logic to go with the flow logic of when it checks for modifications with the SharePoint list. So if you go through the dynamic property here and actually scroll at the bottom, let me just do this. So it says for token, you will get trigger window start token and trigger window end token. So since is basically trigger window start, so at what time you want to start, and then the until is trigger window end token. So now this will make sure that your action is checking for changes between that interval of time, and here the interval time is whatever the Power Automate connector checked with SharePoint. What was the last time? When was the last time it checked, and what is the interval? If you are not very familiar with this, how to handle it, just look at the documentation and put these two values in, and you will be using the out-of-the-box way of handling interval times. If you are someone that is very keen to manage this within yourself, you have the power to go do it, to manage the specific intervals you want, and using those specific intervals to get changes. Now, one thing this action requires is the ability to understand that something was changed. And that does not come for free, right? Because we need a way to track all of the different changes that happens in that particular list. So to do that, this action requires versioning turned on. So that's the only caveat here. And we have this in the right there in the information icon. If you click on it, it will actually give you that this must have versioning. The list must have versioning turned on. Now, there's also another important thing here. Because it depends on versioning, that directly correlates to how farther can you go back. If you just have only one item to be stored as versioning, then you can only go n-1, right? If you have 5 versions stored, you can go n-5. So that's the important thing here. But again, this is something that you can configure for your list and understand what is really needed based on your business process, and then bring it to your workflow and do the same. So that's the gist of the feature. You have when an item or file is modified, and then when you have get changes for an item action that can actually go and figure out what is the change that happened. Now, one of the things, if you open Show Advanced option, is we have some interesting option there. which is include minor versions. So, most of the time, the major version is considered as the version that is available to all users in a given list. But sometimes you might have business logic that you want to apply on minor versions as well. But do understand that if you choose to do that, you should have the workflow should be running in the context of someone that has access to minor versions and can read minor versions out from the list. So the default option for this is include minor versions. It does not include minor versions, that's a no, but you can obviously change that to S. And if you are able to access the minor versions, you can go ahead and access them and the properties here. Now, so these two are done. So the next thing is, great, I built this workflow. How the heck do I know that something was changed? How is Power Automate going to help me find that? So let's go see how that is going to work here. So here, I'm going to choose the condition, right? And I want to know what properties, some of the properties that changed. And maybe in my business logic, I know exactly what I'm targeting, right? So if I check in the condition, and you can see here that I have get changes for an item or a file. And this has some interesting dynamic outputs and something that we worked really brainstormed a lot to make this very easy for end users. So we have something called has column changed and then followed by the column name, right? So you can see has column changed ID, has column changed asset tag, model, serial number, purchase date, color, device photo, everything, right? And there is also a status. Now, if you're very specifically focusing on status, now what you can do is you can just say in your condition, has column change status is equal to true. That is it. That's how you can now understand that that column was changed in that specific time interval from the get changes action. So it's really, really simple. You can go to the dynamic properties, look at the format, has column changed. It's answering the question yes or no, but in terms of the programming, it's actually true or false. And then you use that in the condition and say true. Now, if you're someone that wants to get the collection and do more on your own, we have that as well. So if you actually scroll down in the dynamic properties after all of that, we actually had, I think, one of the properties as a collection. Let me see. Maybe we removed it. Yeah, there it is. Has column changed? A collection showing which columns have changed. So this is a collection. So you can also do something if your job is not about condition, but you just want to enumerate every column that has changed and do some parallel things. So for example, I can say add an action and do a switch, right? Choose a value. And I can go down here, has column changed. And then here, I can actually do more stuff by enumerating those. And I think I'm doing a little bit something wrong here, which is actually, I would do this for each. Oops. Oh, that's not for each. Apply to each. And I can do it as column change.
This is, sorry, Chaks, this is virtually the same that somebody is watching behind of your back and you're trying to demo it. So there's only 250 of us in the call, so no pressure. So.
Yeah, this is the live demo. You can see I did not record anything.
Yeah, exactly.
And for each and apply to each just brings my my problem with low code and professional development. But for users that are actually using the tool that don't have any experience on the professional development side will find apply to each much more soothing than for each. But it's just English strings at this point in time. But you can do apply to each and then go about understanding what those columns are and apply your business logic. So instead of just doing condition, you could also switch to a parallel loop now to go do that. So a lot of great options here. And again, if you're going to use the get changes action, you do need versioning turned on, which is there in the documentation. And how backwards you could go is dependent on that versioning setting. And for the trigger, you don't need any versioning. Because trigger does not depend on versioning. It just depends on the fact that something changed in the list. So this is great. I think we have seen how to use it, but I want to show you a real demo here. So I have a list issue tracker. If you got list in your tenant, awesome. If you can try it out, the issue tracker template. That's one of the templates available out of the box with the Microsoft List app. Now, the issue tracker is great to track things in my list and have a lightweight system than depending on, let's say, a powerful, project management tool or something like that. So it's very specific to my team, my feature group. And here's an example of that. Now, at some point in time, let's say we do want to promote some of the items to, in this case, let's say Visual Studio, DevOps, Azure DevOps, and create a feature card for my engineers to now consider it as a very major item because PMs have discussed about all the issues and we have promoted an issue to Azure DevOps. Very common scenario, I think, across the board, and we see customers doing that. Now, with Power Automate, this makes it really simple, right? You could also go manually, say, select an item, and then go to Automate menu and have a flow that can actually say create workflow item. But that's like 1980s, right? I mean, we are in 2020 and we need something that is much more easier and predictable to go do the job. And I know from my team that if the statuses won't fix, right? If the statuses won't fix and the priority is critical, I do want the decision to now go to my engineering team to go do further investigation to see how we can unblock the issue and have a fix one or other way or proposals and brainstorming that. So I need engineering heads to go and do that. So that's the scenario here. And now with this new trigger and get changes action, I can actually go do that, right? So I can now say, hey, something got modified in this list. The status column modified. If the status column was modified, then is the priority of that item is critical. If the priority of this item is critical, then we need to create an Azure DevOps feature card in my team's project. And that's how the scenario is going to play out, right? So are you all with me still? Yep, that's the scenario. So now I'm just going to refresh this page. Most of the time, it's good if I refresh and make it the current. So I'm going to open this item. And by the way, you're seeing another demo here, which if there is time, I can go through today, or I can find time when the feature is actually released. This is the feature about formatting the header, the footer, and the body of the form so that you can have this wide view with properties under every section customized and have a header and a footer to drive some useful scenarios in the experiences that your users use the form. So it's a little distraction, but I can come and give a session about this once the feature is released. But we have been showing this feature across various webinars and demos that we're doing as part of the Microsoft List product. So here, I'm going to change the progress to, I'm going to move this. I'm going to change the progress to won't fix, but I'm going to show you the flow as well here. So here it is. all of the runs, right? So I'm going to go back, change to won't fix, and save this. And let's see. Now it's going to be a waiting game to see when this gets picked up. But this is going to get picked up in a minute, and it's going to run the flow. I see some, while we wait for this, I do see some chat messages. I'm just looking through that. Okay, so there's a question around minor version. Awesome. There's a question around, would there be a reason that the since version and until version would always return 1.0, even if the current version is 6.0? I do not know. It really depends on your versioning settings, on how this is all configured. So we don't do anything beyond that, but it may happen that since and until version are lower than the current version in the cases where flow did not check, or there are some logics that it did not appear to run. So that's why we have the since and until version for you to figure out, and the current version, Boolean value is current version in the get action changes to drive some scenarios using that. So if it's not current version, then you have some problems with the sync. So that would be another way to find that out. Let me check now. So there it is. It's running. So what this has now done is, one thing I did not show you in the flow is it actually sent me a Teams message. So it went and looked at the assigned to column in my list, and it sent a message to that user in the assigned to column, a Teams message. So here it is. Issue changed to won't fix, right? The issue blah, blah, blah was changed to won't fix, though it marked as critical. Please review and promote it as a bug. So I'm going to create a bug, and I'm going to say, we need to find a fix for this as it is important from an experience point of view. And I'm going to hit submit. Yep, that happens all the time. No need to panic. And now it actually created, it sent, and then you saw immediately I actually got a message back saying a bug was created with the Azure DevOps link here, right there. Now, if I go back to my Azure DevOps link, you can see there is the item that I just, it just got created. And you can see that there's also user comments. We need to find a fix for this as it's important for the experience point of view. So whatever I gave in the comment has come back here. Now, one thing, if you notice here, it's very hard today to get the formatting right using Power Automate connections and actions. So that's something you would have to play around to get it right. You could even put your user comments as a discussion. But that's something I would say is something, it's a pain that I go through every day in making sure I can format these things right in a way that I can read, users can read them. But that aside, you saw the scenario now. Item got changed, status was marked critical, and status was marked won't fix and critical, and it got created. So I'm going to delete this so I don't create any trouble to my Azure DevOps here. We can go ahead and see how the workflow works here. And I promise you, this is only going to create a Teams message and this flow only if the status column has changed and the priority is equal to critical. Here's the workflow to prove that. So when an item or file is modified, right? So I have that particular trigger, and I also have the particular action talking about get changes. And if you look at my list settings, I also have versioning turned on, which I think I will skip for now. So the first thing I check is as status column change since last check, right? So I use the status has column changed. So I go here and I selected has column change status. I check if it's true, and then I go ahead here to say if status is won't fix and priority is critical, right? Now I get the status value from the current item, right? So if I put here status, right? So I do get the status value when an item is created or modified, trigger output, because the trigger ran, and I do get the value when the trigger ran. So I do get the status value. Status is a choice column. So when you look in the Power Automate, instead of status, we do status value. And then I also check for priority. Right, priority again is a choice column, so you get a priority value. So I say status is equal to won't fix, priority is critical. Then I move on to my next block, which is yes, they are true. What am I supposed to do now? And now I can say post a choice of options as the flow bot to a user. So now I can create my own choice, create bug, ask more details, and go through the flow, issue all the give all the values here. And then I wait for the action. And now I can then say from that, waiting action that I have here, post a choice of options, because it's waiting for the option to be completed by the user. I can say selected option. If it's create bug, then I go create a work item. And now then I post a message as the flow bot to a user. Very simple, straightforward. It's exactly right you had planned in the way how I explained how this is going to work. So that is the power this trigger and action gives to now take your business workflows to the next level with item modified trigger and get changes action trigger action. So that's my demo, and that's what I wanted to share today. We do have 15 minutes. I would like to use this 15 minutes, Vesa, to answer some of the questions people may have, not just with this trigger, but also any other questions they have around Power Platform integrations. Because I think it's been a while since we had some back and forth question time for back and forth questions.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. If you don't mind, you can probably keep on screen sharing if we need to show something, and then absolutely. Move on to questions after that. So definitely.
So I'm going through comments. There's a comment, I wrote the message about since version and to version. Just notice context approval, content approval was turned on. Okay, awesome. Yeah, it really comes down to your versioning settings. So make sure that the versioning settings is right so users can get the right experience when they build workflows on top of that. In terms of licensing, there's another question. Even if you immediately exit the flow, if a specific column wasn't changed, it still counts as a run. Licensing is about API calls now. Runs do not account to licensing. So it doesn't matter if you have 1,000 runs or 1,000,000 runs. Licensing does not come into effect. Licensing come into effect in the API calls and you make in the connector, whether it's to SharePoint or to any other thing. Every step is basically an API call. So that would be what accounts to licensing. And in your scenario where you exit the flow when a specific column wasn't changed, if that involves get changes action, then there is one step. So that step requires an equivalent to a call. And I think the trigger is also counted for the API call. So there'll be 3 steps you would check. Now, I'm not a licensing expert, but that's something you would need to probably clarify with Power Automate team on how licensing works. But mostly you should be okay. It's not going to override or bring down the licensing just because you're checking something and then terminating from the flow. So going to next question, any plans to include item version details along with flow trigger, adding a trigger condition for based on specific column? So item version detail, we have plans for the next step for this feature is to actually give you old values and new values. That's something that's missing, right? So what's the old value? You got the new value from the trigger, but really when the change happened, what was the value of that property? So in this case, if status column changed, in that get actions, I want to get the value of the status column as well, what got changed. and if possible, give the previous version as well, the version value. That is harder for us to solve, just because we have to traverse the versioning tree and give you the version details. But that's something we're working on, after the current priorities, which is basically packaging and stuff. Once that is complete, we'll come back to this and enable the scenario for getting previous value and new value along with the version details. Maybe we will also have an action that says get version details and give it the version property, version number, it will give you all the details for that particular version. Next question. We're looking for Graph API to change flow approval actions so that we can approve reject from non-flow screen. Unfortunately, I'm not a SME on that. You might need to work with the Graph API team and Power Automate team to get that. And once that works across the board, I'm assuming it would work on a web part as well, but I'm not familiar with that area. What would be nice to have is when a specific field column is modified. So we thought about that a lot, whether we need a trigger that can eliminate the step, but the API calls, everything is very expensive on our side. So COGS wise, it will be an expensive thing to do. And that would also mean that for that trigger to work, you have to enable versioning. So you're stuck with the fact that the trigger itself now will require versioning on the list, even though we don't need versioning just to track modification. So we decided to split that and provide customers value in twofold. Customers that don't care about these versioning, right, that get changes, they can just use item modify. Customers that do care about getting changes, now they can add the get changes action and then make sure that versioning is turned on and whatnot. So from an experience point of view, the experience we have right now simplifies for all of the scenarios and different type of user segments. If we had gone with one trigger for like, hey, when an item is modified, and by the way, you can also say which column, confused a lot of us because from the start, you have to enable versioning. Otherwise, even the modification won't work. And it's very also, from COGS wise, it is very expensive for us back and forth to go back and get things done. How does this handle check-in action? Check-in action is an update. So this flow will run for that update. Whether you check in as a minor version or a major version, that again comes down to get changes action. If you're getting changes, because that would have an effect if we choose to include minor versions as well to get changes from. But anything that updates the list is considered to be in effect run the flow. I hope this is coming to Logic Apps as well. I think it will, but it won't automatically give you the out of the box, running, because it's Logic Apps are based on polling. So you would have to make sure that you have that logic as well by going through the polling of the trigger. But will there be an action finding current and previous values? So I think I just answered that about previous values and current values. That's something we will add. Now, at this point, we don't have that support yet. Has anyone ever heard someone say that they are a licensing expert? True. Absolutely not. But there is someone in Microsoft that can help you. So the project here would be finding that person. But unfortunately, that's not the product team, because product team doesn't really make decisions on how business is run at Microsoft. Question here. Will there be a search for MS list in Teams app, if you know? I think there are plans across the board to make search experience consistent. So while I'm not the PM for that team, and it's a very different team altogether, I do know that there are projects and work going on to enable those experiences. And when that experience comes up, I'm pretty sure that you would be able to search within the list as well. So for example, if you're in a list, you do Control F, it goes to the search bar. When you search for something, it would search in that context. And in that context, you have the list. So that would be my guess, but I am not the PM of the feature. Hopefully that's being built. Is this available in GCC today? We should be available in GCC High, because the SharePoint connector is available and you can use that there. Is it a premium feature? It's not a premium feature. It's included in the standard features. Vesa's 12 lookup threshold can be bypassed using a view in Power Automate. Yes, so you select in the trigger or get changes action. All of our actions have the property that is, limit columns by view. So that will give you all of the views available in the list. And a good thing is that out of the box templates come with views built in. So if you use a template like here, a list from a template like Asset Manager, you can see I already have Asset Manager views that I get out of the box. So that's one of the ways we suggest. Power Apps, we are working with them. There's a whole effort that we will start probably next early calendar year on how to really support large lists with Power Apps. There's a lot of things we can do there. And one of the things will be about views. One of the things will be about how you are able to select index column versus non-index column, and how that applies to filter and sorting views. There's a lot of stuff in Power Apps that we have that we need to start working on. But that is when I would see this would get accounted for as well.
I think that's it then. You actually went through all of the pending questions, which is great. And we are anyway running out of time. So let me actually move into the slides for the close-up. We did have more than 281 peaked attendees today, which is pretty cool. Now that the teams can actually handle more than 250 attendees, so we're not hitting that limit as well. So thank you, Chaks, for the updates on that one. On the other topics which we went through today, the monthly summary, where we will acknowledge in the blog post all of the people who contributed within the past month, that will go live latest tomorrow. It's slightly delayed because I came from a family vacation yesterday and I've been trying to catch up on all of the things. So bear with me, a few hours delayed on the normal schedule. But great session from Chaks related on this one. And obviously, if you're interested on all of the discussions or any of the topics which we went through today, the recording will be available in 24 hours in our Microsoft 365 SharePoint Community YouTube channel, where you find different kind of other YouTube videos as well. So trainings for Microsoft SharePoint Framework, Microsoft Teams, and not just development stuff as well. So it is a great channel to subscribe as well. If you're interested on following up on what's happening in social media, if you are in Twitter, use Microsoft 365 Dev or Microsoft 365 PnP account. The PnP account is more broad. It's not just about dev, but the Microsoft 365 Dev is more targeted on the dev side as well. The next SharePoint Framework community call is in this week, so on Thursday, 2 days from now, 7 a.m. Pacific time. The next Microsoft 365 General Dev call with this crew is in August 20th, which is happening soon as well, so a week from now. The next monthly community call is on September 9th, and then we do have multiple other community calls as well. We're kind of due historical reasons, we are divided in multiple different groups and multiple different people who are delivering this, and we are more and more aligning this in the future as well. But if you're interested on adaptive cards, I think it's called this week as well as an example, and there's a specific topics on there. All of the calls are getting recorded as well, so you can easily quickly summarize those calls afterwards as well, so you don't have to watch them every single time as well. But that's it for us for today. So thank you everybody for joining. Thank you for active, lovely discussion in the chat. It's good to have that interactivity ongoing on the chats, and that's really one of the power of this call as well. So you can ask the questions and community is answering those questions as well. But that's it for now. From a timing perspective, as said, recording will be available in the YouTube channel within 24 hours. But thank you for joining. Thank you for being here. Thank you for helping everybody else in the community. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's stay in touch in the future as well. And if there's any questions, any doubts, please reach out in the social media. The team members, community members, us as well. We're trying to help you as much as possible. Thank you.